Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we have another brand new Mattel Jurassic World set to take a look at, as we have the newest kind of story pack set from Mattel, which as you can quite clearly see is Ben and Ankylosaurus Bumpy. This is obviously a very cool set because it's the first time we actually have a Ben figure in the main Mattel line, and I do believe I have heard that this Bumpy is actually an entirely newly sculpted Bumpy. It's not the same one that we had in the attack pack, so we'll have to bring the other one out and take a look at the two together here in a little bit. But as far as the packaging goes, again, it's kind of like your standard Dino Escape packaging, which is really nice as usual. And then on the back of the packaging, you can see that we have some very nice images of both Ben, Bumpy, as well as an image down here showing off one of the other story packs in the Mattel line, which is obviously Kenji and the Monolophosaurus. So, without further ado, let's pop this open and take a look at it. So here is our very dirty looking Ben. If we can get him to stand up, and he doesn't want to. There we go. We also have his kind of shield that he has created here, as well as his spear right there, which fell over, and then Bumpy, which is obviously the final piece of the puzzle right here, and probably the fan favorite of the set. But I honestly love Ben. I think Ben is great in the show, and he might be my favorite character out of every one of the kids in Camp Cretaceous. I think Ben is probably the most interesting and one that I just usually seem to be able to find more enjoyment in than the others. But I also love Bumpy because who doesn't? So this set is definitely fun, and this is without question a different version of Bumpy than the Attack Pack version. As I had just taken a look at the two together a moment ago, it's definitely a different figure. So let's go ahead, jump straight to a closer look, and we'll check both of these out right now. So we'll start with Bumpy, and you can see that as far as the detailing aspect goes, Bumpy looks really, really well done. I honestly feel like this looks like a slightly older version of Bumpy in comparison to the previous Attack Pack version. It just seems like Bumpy has aged a little bit, but not too far, obviously, but definitely a little tiny bit older. Maybe that's just my take on it. It may not necessarily be the case, but again, that's just how I feel. But you can see that the nostrils are sculpted out quite nicely. We have some very beautiful looking skin texture throughout the entire course of the face of Bumpy. Really nice detailing in the beak, and you can also see the beak is painted with a nice grayish coloration, and also sports a pretty nice glossy look, so it stands out, which I do quite like. You can see that we have this kind of yellowish mustard type brown coloration for the majority of the color of the face, and it transitions to a blue up here on the top of the head from like the middle area of the face, a little under the eye area, up into the head, and we start to see the armor kind of overtake the Ankylosaurus. One thing that I can say, though, that I don't like about this one as much as I liked about the other one is the fact that up here on the head, we don't really see the yellow creeping through those large armored scales. The Attack Pack version kind of had the yellow kind of coloration creeping through. This one does not. It's just really strong up here as far as that bluish coloration goes. But the eye is also painted very, very nicely. You can see that it's also quite beautifully glossed, so it shines quite nicely as well. And you start to see some of the spikes and stuff pick up here on the Ankylosaurus, which are painted with what appears to be kind of like an off-white or a very light gray. As we move back here into the back of Ankylosaurus Bumpy, you can see that again the detailing is really vibrant, like it really pops on the sculpt, and I think it looks beautiful because of how nicely detailed it is and how vibrant that detail looks. You can also see that again as far as like those armored areas throughout the course of the back, we have that kind of light grayish or an off-white for the coloration, and it's all very nicely done overall, very precisely applied. As you start to move down the leg, you can see more of the kind of armored larger scales right here, but they transition to a little bit of a smaller scaling the further down the leg you get until we get down here near the feet, and it's a really nice fine scaling. And you can also see that we have the speckling that Mattel usually adds. We have like what appears to be, I think, brown speckles throughout in certain areas, which adds a little extra color variation. The sculpting of the foot looks really nice. The nails also look beautiful. They do seem to have a bit of a gloss coat added, but no specific nail paint other than a gloss coat, which does still give it, the appearance of nail color, but just not any actual paint on the nails. Coming back into the stomach region, you could see more really, really nice scale detail. Again, the Mattel figures are just unreasonably well detailed for what they are, and that continues throughout the course of the figure. As you move back here into the thigh, you can see some nice muscle definition, as well as again more of that blue coloration coming down over some of those larger kind of armored scales, but the blue tapers off as we transition down the leg. Again, you can see the knee right here in the front, as well as some nice creasing in the joint of the knee. The rear foot also looks quite beautiful. You can pick up on some more of those speckles here and there, and again some more of that gloss on the nails. As you move out into the tail, you can see that again we have some more really nice, very fine scale detail for the underside of the Bumpy, but you can see that up here on the top we have that armored look, and the blue is quite abundant, but the kind of like off-white grayish coloration stops in the body and does not run out onto the tail. As you can see that it's all just one solid blue out here before it transitions to the same color that you see on the little armored areas up here on the club tail of Bumpy. You can see it's kind of like that kind of off-white, sort of like a light gray color. And you can see that the detailing out there on the club tail also looks beautiful. That coloration goes the entire way around the club. As you move through the course of the underside, again, you can pick up on some of those speckles. There is the Jurassic Facts app code if you would like to add this to your collection, if my camera would focus on it correctly. But you also can see that, again, the detailing looks beautiful under here. Like you can see some skin wrinkles and stuff right here in the stomach region. Some more wrinkling here in the throat and chin area of our Ankylosaurus. If we take a look from the other side, again, the paintwork looks to be really well done, very precise on this one. Like sometimes you have sloppy painted eyes and stuff like that, maybe a sloppy painted beak. That is not the case for this Bumpy. It looks beautiful as far as the paintwork goes. The only thing I'm really upset about, not even really upset, just kind of let down a little bit, would be the fact that the yellow isn't creeping in between the blue up here like we do see on Bumpy in the show and on the initial attack pack version. But you can see that the legs look great on this side, as do the scales in the stomach region. You can see them popping the closer you get to the bluish areas. They look really nice, but then again gets really fine the further down into the stomach you get. But the muscle definition is really nicely displayed in both the front and rear legs, and also the scale detail looks phenomenal on both sides. The legs are in a different position on this side compared to what we see on the opposing side. As you can see that they're just slightly different, not too far off, nothing crazy or dramatic. And then we lead out into the tail again. The tail looks pretty much the same over here like we had seen on the initial side, but definitely another really nice looking Bumpy figure. And then we've got ourselves Ben, and Ben has that exact Season 2 type of an appearance to him, where he's very weathered. He's been on the island living alone, or mostly alone aside from his company of Bumpy, for quite some time, and you can see that he is really filthy again, looking just dirty beyond belief all over both the front and back. The overall appearance as far as likeness goes looks like Ben, I would say, pretty closely. It's not picture perfect, not as nice as some of the other figures that we've had, but it definitely looks about as close as I think you're going to get. You have some very nicely painted eyes. The lips are painted, as well as, of course, the hair and that kind of headband that Ben is wearing right there. The detailing of the hair also looks really nice. Like, that's impressively well done for a figure this type. And as you move down, you can see that there's like a lot of wrinkling and stuff in the shirt. Again, the shirt looks just as weathered as Ben himself and sports all of that mud throughout. And you can see that, again, the detailing aspect of Ben is really well done. I think he might actually be one of my favorites as far as these human figures from the Camp Cretaceous line, just because, of course, I love Ben. He's one of my favorites on the show. But there's just so much paint variation included on him, of course, with all of the different areas that he has as far as clothing and everything goes, but also just because he has this really muddy look, which, again, is exactly how he looks in Season 2. As you move down, you can see even his belt buckle is painted right there. Again, we have more of that mud throughout the course of his shorts, moving down into his legs, as well as down into his shoes. You can even see his socks and everything. So Ben is really nicely done. Again, I think his likeness is pretty darn close to what he looks like in the show. I think maybe Kenji and Darius looked a little better as far as the likeness goes, but he's really close, and definitely another beautiful Mattel figure as far as the Camp Cretaceous kids, and I'm psyched to finally have Ben. And then we also have the kind of like shield that he has created here that you can see was obviously created with some sticks and some vegetation, and unfortunately there's no real paintwork to it aside from just the greenish coloration, but the actual sculpt and detail is really beautifully done. This one would have been an absolute nightmare to paint, so I can understand why Mattel would have just gone the route of giving it one solid green color. And again, sculpt-wise, it looks really nice. And the paint, I feel like, is pretty much what you would expect for a figure like that, or a addition to a figure like that. And then, of course, we have the spear, which doesn't want to sit nicely in my hands. And the spear is also sculpted beautifully. Again, really nice, precise paintwork as far as the spear goes with the spearhead and everything. So that is just another fun little addition. Nothing amazing, nothing crazy, but just fun to have in this set. So both of these are honestly another awesome addition to the Mattel line, and I love that they gave us an alternate variant of Bumpy, but just finally having a Ben figure is awesome. As far as articulation goes with Bumpy, we have the head on a swivel. It actually can move up and down, so you can move the head to look down a little bit, up a little bit, not too far, but it does move. Again, the swivel is very smooth, and we can't go left or right or anything. We do have articulation in the front and back legs. Don't think they come out away from the body. Nope, just forward and back. And then we, of course, have the articulation in the tail of Bumpy, so we can go side to side, but we can also swivel the tail around. And then as far as Ben goes, we have articulation in the neck, but it's super stiff. There we go. Kind of snapped it into place, but you can see that that moves quite nicely. We also have shoulder articulation, so it can go forward and up and down all over the place, back, everywhere. And you also have elbow articulation, so you can move that area as well. You have midsection articulation here on a swivel. You also have hip articulation, so we can go forward and back, and then we can also move the knee. We can go out away from the body if we want to do splits. So lots of articulation for our Ben and our Bumpy figure. As far as a comparison goes between the previous Bumpy and the newest Bumpy, there are the two different versions. You can see this is the Attack Pack version, this is the newer version. One thing straight away we can take notice to is the fact that the club tail is painted on the newer one, not on the older one. The blue is a lot more abundant on the head of the newer one, more so than the older one, and the coloration in general I feel like is really quite different, of course, aside from like the yellowish brownish tone and then the white and blue here on the back. But like if you look at the coloration of the spikes here on the head of Bumpy, they're also quite different. The eyes are even differently shaped, but they appear to be maybe the same shade. Actually, they look like they're probably the same shade of brown and black in there. But again, the entire head sculpt, you could see looking at the two together is very, very different, which is really impressive that it can look so different. Again, furthering the potential of it maybe being a slightly different aged Bumpy than this one, but it actually looks to be the same size. Like there doesn't appear to be any size different. Oh no, actually the newer one is definitely a little longer, especially if you just look at the two tails together. The tail of the newer one is quite a bit larger than the tail of the older one, so maybe this is again a slightly older version of Bumpy. You can see what I was saying, how I liked how the yellow is creeping through the scales on the older one, does not on the newer one. But it is fun to have now numerous different versions of Bumpy, including the adult that they've recently released. But this is definitely yet another really fun version of Bumpy. As far as a size goes, for a length, you are looking at about the 5¼ inch range, or about 13 centimeters, maybe a little over, closing in on 13.5, but not quite. And then for a height, the highest point would probably be the head, maybe the back. Actually, we'll go to the back. So you're looking at a little over 2 inches or 5 centimeters, but not too far. Maybe a little tiny hint over. But as far as Ben goes, for a height, you're looking at about 3.5 inches or 9 centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Ankylosaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line in comparison to our Ben and Bumpy. And you can see that as far as the size goes, obviously Ben is quite a bit smaller than Muldoon, being a child. And you can see that Bumpy falls right in that same size range as far as like Attack Pack or Wild Pack sized figures go, and obviously isn't too much different in size compared to the previous Attack Pack version of Bumpy, but some really nicely sized figures. I feel like that as far as the size goes, they're pretty much all picture perfect. So this Ben and Bumpy set from Mattel is yet another awesome release from them, and it's nice to finally be getting closer and closer to completing the group of kids from Camp Cretaceous. We do still have a few more to go, which they are all on their way, but again, Ben was one that we didn't have prior, like Darius has been released numerous times at this point in many different sets. In fact, Darius is actually released, I believe, in a set with this exact Bumpy figure, as this Bumpy was released in a 3-pack on Amazon with Velociraptor Blue, as well as, again, Darius. But it's nice to finally have Ben. We did already receive Ben in Imaginext form, but we didn't receive Ben in the main line of Mattel's Jurassic World line. So it is nice to finally have him, and especially with one that's as nicely done as this. I love the fact that they went for Season 2 Ben, because I feel like he's probably one of the favorite versions of him. I know he's my personal favorite as far as Ben goes, and they did capture the likeness and overall appearance of him quite nicely in comparison to the way he appears in Season 2 of Camp Cretaceous, with that very dirty, very weathered, and almost wild man type of a look that he has going on in that season of Camp Cretaceous. And of course, Bumpy is beautifully done. The only thing that's a little off as far as this set goes is I think Bumpy was actually closer to an adult in Season 2 as opposed to the size that we see here. But Bumpy still looks great. I feel like Bumpy was beautifully sculpted just like the initial version was, and quite beautifully painted as well. And definitely very nice and precise paintwork throughout the course of Bumpy, which is nice to see because sometimes Mattel tends to get a little sloppy with their paintwork, but this one looks perfect as far as the actual application of the paint goes, minus the head. The head could have used that yellowish like mustard type of a color creeping through the armored area of the head. It would have made such a huge difference as far as I'm concerned with the appeal factor of the figure. But even still, again, I really like the appearance of this one, and I think the Bumpy figure that we have here is also a nice addition to this set because of the fact that they went an alternate route and gave us a newly sculpted and newly painted version, as opposed to just giving us the same attack pack version that we had before, which was what I actually thought we were getting. So it's nice to, kind of a pleasant surprise to have a different version of Bumpy. And then we, of course, have the spear and the shield as well, which, of course, is nothing amazing, but it's a fun addition to this set and really helps to create that wild man look for Ben himself. So as a whole, this is definitely yet another awesome set from Mattel that I am really excited to finally have here in my collection. This I purchased on Target.com. I don't know for sure if it's still in stock right now, but I will include a link in the description to where you can purchase this on Target.com if it is in fact still in stock. So make sure you check that link, make sure you buy this set if you do in fact find it, and make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.